The searing pain of the fire had long since faded, but Nora Vasquez would never forget the sound of her screams as the flames engulfed her family's homestead on that fateful night in 1876. Now, 3 years later, she sat alone in a stagecoach bound for Willits, California, her gloved hands clutching a letter that promised a fresh start in a town where nobody knew her name or the tragedy that had rewritten her fate. The California sun streamed through the dust-coated window of the stagecoach, illuminating the thick veil that concealed Nora's face from curious eyes. At 24, she had already lived 2 lives, one as the beautiful daughter of Spanish immigrants who had settled in Arizona territory, and another as a recluse, hidden away at her aunt's home in San Francisco, learning to live with a face that even her own relatives struggled to look upon. The coach hit a deep rut, jolting Nora from her thoughts. She steadied herself and glanced out at the rolling hills that surrounded Willits. The small town nestled in Mendocino County had been described to her as a place where a person could disappear and reinvent themselves by her late aunt's friend, who had offered Nora a position as a bookkeeper in her general store. "Willits coming up, madam," the driver called back. "Should be there in about 10 minutes. Nora nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her. She touched her veil, ensuring it was secure, and took a deep breath. The opportunity to work as a bookkeeper was perfect. Numbers had always made sense to her. They didn't change their expression when they saw her face. When the stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of Willits Main Street, Nora gathered her courage along with her small carpet bag. The driver opened the door, extending his hand to help her down. She noticed his eyes flicker to her veil before quickly looking away. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice soft from disuse. "Madam," he replied with a tip of his hat. Willits was larger than she'd expected, with a busy main street lined with wooden storefronts. A church bell rang in the distance, and the clatter of horses' hooves on packed dirt mingled with the chatter of townsfolk going about their daily business. Miss Vasquez, a plump woman with steel-gray hair, approached, her face creased in a welcoming smile. "I'm Martha Winters. We've been corresponding about the position at my store." "Yes, Mrs. Winters. Thank you for meeting me." Nora extended her hand, grateful when the older woman clasped it without hesitation. "Let's get you settled," Martha said kindly. "I've arranged a room for you above the store. It's modest, but clean and private." As they walked down the main street, Nora felt the stares of passers-by. Some were merely curious about the new arrival, but others couldn't hide their speculation about what lay beneath the veil. She had grown accustomed to the looks, but they still stung. Martha led her to a 2-story building with Winters General Merchandise painted in bold letters across its facade. "The store's down here," she explained, "and your living quarters are upstairs. There's a private entrance around the side, so you won't have to come through the shop if you don't want to." The room above the store was indeed modest: a single bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a washstand, and a wardrobe, but it was clean and bright, with a window overlooking the street. It would be the first place that was truly hers since the fire. "I'll leave you to get settled," Martha said. "Come down when you're ready and I'll show you the books." When Martha had gone, Nora removed her veil and hat, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. The scars were a web of pink and white tissue that stretched from her right temple down across her cheek, pulling at the corner of her mouth and continuing down her neck to disappear beneath her high-collared dress. The fire had taken her home, her parents, and her beauty in one cruel night. She turned away from the mirror and unpacked her few belongings. Along with her clothing, she set out a small framed photograph of her parents, taken shortly after their marriage, and a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. These simple treasures were all that remained of her former life. After arranging her things, Nora replaced her veil and made her way downstairs to begin her new position. Martha's store was bustling with customers, but the older woman quickly ushered Nora to a small office at the back. The previous bookkeeper left things in quite a state, Martha explained, gesturing to stacks of ledgers and receipts. I hope it's not too overwhelming. I'm sure I can sort it out, Nora replied, relieved to have a task that would occupy her mind. Over the next few days, Nora fell into a routine. She would rise early, have a small breakfast in her room, and then spend the day organizing Martha's accounts. The work was satisfying, and Martha was kind, never pressing Nora about her past or her veiled appearance. In the evenings, Nora would read by lamplight or sometimes sit by her window, watching the town settle into nighttime quietude. On her 5th day in Willits, Nora was working on reconciling a column of figures when the office door opened. Instead of Martha, a tall man in a dust-covered duster and worn cowboy hat entered. He stopped short when he saw Nora, clearly expecting someone else. "Excuse me, madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with sun-bleached strands. "I was looking for Martha Winters." "She's helping a customer," Nora replied, keeping her head down, focused on her ledger. "Can I assist you with something?" "I'm Nathan Quinn," he said. "I deliver supplies to some of the outlying ranches and mines for Mrs. Winters." Nora finally looked up, though she knew her veil revealed little of her face. She was struck by Nathan's eyes, a clear, steady blue that met hers without wavering, as if he could see through the protective barrier of her veil. "I'm Nora Vasquez," she replied. "I'm the new bookkeeper." Nathan nodded. Mrs. Winters mentioned she'd hired someone. "Welcome to Willits, Miss Vasquez." Before Nora could respond, Martha bustled into the office. "Nathan, right on time. I've got a delivery for the Harrington Ranch. They're expanding their operation and ordered quite a lot of supplies." Nathan turned his attention to Martha, discussing the details of the delivery, but Nora felt his gaze return to her more than once. Unlike the looks she received from others, his didn't seem filled with morbid curiosity or pity. There was something else there, a genuine interest that made her both uncomfortable and strangely hopeful. After Nathan left, Martha smiled at Nora. "Nathan's one of the good ones. Ex-cavalry. Fought in the war between the states when he was barely more than a boy. Now he handles deliveries for me and does odd jobs around town. Dependable as sunrise." Nora nodded, returning to her ledger, but her mind kept drifting to Nathan Quinn's steady blue gaze. Over the next few weeks, Nathan made regular appearances at the store to pick up deliveries. Each time, he would tip his hat to Nora and exchange a few words. Their conversations were brief and usually related to business, but Nora found herself looking forward to these interactions. One rainy afternoon, in late autumn, Nora was closing the store while Martha visited a sick friend. Just as she was about to lock up, Nathan appeared at the door, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Miss Vasquez," he said, "sorry to trouble you, but my wagon wheel broke a few miles out of town. I managed to get back, but I need to leave these supplies somewhere dry overnight." "Of course," Nora replied, holding the door wider. "You can store them in the back room." Nathan brought in several crates, stacking them neatly against the wall. When he finished, he stood awkwardly in the middle of the store, water pooling at his feet. "Would you like some coffee?" Nora asked impulsively. "To warm up before you head back out in the rain." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by a warm smile. "That's mighty kind of you, Miss Vasquez. I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," she assured him, moving to the small stove in the corner of the store where Martha kept a pot of coffee warm during business hours. She poured 2 cups, handing one to Nathan. They sat at a small table near the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. For the first time since arriving in Willits, Nora felt the stirrings of genuine connection. "How are you finding our little town?" Nathan asked, his hands wrapped around the warm cup. "It's peaceful," Nora replied. "The people have been kind." Nathan nodded. "It's a good place. Not perfect, but most folks mind their own business and help out when needed." Nora hesitated, then asked, "Have you lived here long?" "About 5 years," he said. "After the war, I drifted for a while, tried my hand at ranching in Wyoming Territory, but it didn't take. Ended up here almost by accident." He smiled. "Best accident of my life." "Sometimes accidents lead us where we need to be," Nora said softly, thinking of the letter that had brought her to Willits. Nathan studied her for a moment. "If you don't mind my asking, what brought you to Willits?" "It's not exactly on the way to anywhere." Nora tensed, her hand involuntarily rising to touch her veil. "A fresh start," she said simply. Nathan seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. "Mrs. Winters says you've worked wonders with her bookkeeping. Said she finally knows exactly how much money she's making." Nora relaxed slightly. "Numbers make sense to me. They're predictable. Unlike people," Nathan offered with understanding in his eyes. "Yes," she agreed. "Unlike people." They finished their coffee in companionable silence. When Nathan rose to leave, he paused at the door. "Thank you, Miss Vasquez, not just for the coffee but for the conversation." "You're welcome, Mr. Quinn." As autumn turned to winter, Nora's life in Willits settled into a comfortable rhythm. Her work for Martha was satisfying, and she had even begun to venture out more, attending Sunday services at the small church, and occasionally having dinner at the boarding house where Martha lived. Her encounters with Nathan Quinn remained a bright spot in her days. He never pressed her about her veil or her past, but treated her with a gentle courtesy that made her feel like a woman rather than an object of curiosity or pity. One crisp December morning, Nora was walking to the store when she heard raised voices coming from the alleyway beside the saloon. Concerned, she paused, then heard a woman's frightened protest. Without thinking, Nora hurried down the alley to find a young woman, clearly a saloon girl, being accosted by a drunken man. The woman's dress was torn at the shoulder, and fear was etched across her face. "Let her go," Nora demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. The man turned, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as he took in Nora's veiled figure. "Mind your own business, lady," he slurred. "Please," the saloon girl pleaded, trying to pull away. The man tightened his grip, causing the young woman to wince in pain. Nora looked around desperately for something to use as a weapon and spotted a broken piece of wooden crate. She grabbed it and stepped closer. "I said, let her go," Nora repeated, raising the makeshift club. The drunk laughed, releasing the saloon girl to advance on Nora. "What's under that veil, anyway?" "Let's have a look." He reached for Nora's veil, but before he could touch it, a large hand clamped down on his wrist. Nathan Quinn had appeared as if from nowhere, his expression hard as granite. "The lady asked you to leave," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. "I suggest you do as she says." The drunk tried to pull free, but Nathan's grip was like iron. After a brief struggle, the man seemed to realize he was outmatched. "Fine," he muttered. "Ain't worth the trouble anyway." Nathan released him, and the man staggered away, casting a venomous look back at them. Nathan turned to the saloon girl. "You all right, Miss Lily?" The young woman nodded, adjusting her torn dress. "Thanks to this lady. She stepped in when no one else would." Nathan's gaze shifted to Nora, his blue eyes warm with admiration. "That was brave, Miss Vasquez. Foolhardy maybe, but brave." Nora felt her cheeks burn beneath her veil. "I couldn't just walk past." "Get on back to the saloon, Lily," Nathan said gently. "Tell Sam what happened." He'll make sure that fella doesn't come back." After Lily had gone, Nathan offered his arm to Nora. "May I escort you to the store? It's on my way." Nora hesitated, then placed her gloved hand on his arm. They walked in silence for a moment before Nathan spoke again. "Not many people would have done what you did," he said. "Most would have looked the other way." "I know what it's like to be afraid and have no one help," Nora replied quietly. Nathan glanced down at her, a question in his eyes, but he didn't press. Instead, he said, "Christmas is coming up, Mrs. Winters mentioned there's going to be a town social at the church. Will you be attending?" The question caught Nora off guard. She hadn't considered attending such a public event. I don't think so," she stammered. "That's a shame," Nathan said. "I was hoping to see you there." They had reached the store and Nora withdrew her hand from his arm. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Quinn." Nathan tipped his hat. "Any time, Miss Vasquez." He paused, then added, "Think about the social. It might be nice to celebrate with the town." As he walked away, Nora found herself considering his words. The thought of being in a crowded room, feeling the stares and whispers, made her stomach clench with anxiety. But a small part of her, a part she had thought long dead, yearned for connection, for celebration, for joy. The week before Christmas brought a heavy snowfall to Willits. The town was transformed into a winter wonderland, with snow-laden branches and icicles hanging from the eaves of buildings. Despite the cold, there was a festive air as townsfolk prepared for the holiday. Nora was arranging a display of Christmas ribbons in the store window when she spotted Nathan crossing the street, heading toward the store. Her heart quickened as it always did when she saw him, a reaction she had tried unsuccessfully to suppress. The bell above the door jingled as Nathan entered, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the scent of pine. He had a small evergreen branch in his hand, which he presented to Nora with a smile. "For your room," he explained, "to bring a bit of Christmas cheer." Nora accepted the branch, touched by the simple gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn, that's very thoughtful." Nathan removed his hat, revealing hair tousled by the wind. "Nathan, please. After all these months, I think we can dispense with formalities." Nora nodded. "Thank you, Nathan." "And you must call me Nora." His smile widened. "Nora, then." He gestured to the store, which Martha had decorated with red ribbons and greenery. "Looks like Mrs. Winters is in the Christmas spirit." "Yes, she loves the holiday," Nora agreed. "She's been baking cookies all week for the church social." "Speaking of the social," Nathan said, his tone casual but his eyes intent, "have you reconsidered attending?" Nora busied herself with arranging the pine branch in a small vase. "I'm not sure it would be comfortable for me." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand your hesitation, but I'd be honored to escort you if you'd allow me." Nora looked up, surprised by the offer. "Why?" The directness of her question seemed to catch Nathan off guard. He considered his response carefully. "Because I enjoy your company, Nora. Because you're kind and brave and intelligent. And because no one should be alone at Christmas if they don't wish to be." His words sent a flutter of warmth through her chest. "People will stare," she said softly. "Let them," Nathan replied with a shrug. "Their curiosity isn't your burden to bear." Nora took a deep breath. "All right," she said finally. "I'll go, but I may need to leave early." Nathan's face lit up with a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "That's fair. I promise to have you home whenever you wish." He placed his hat back on his head. "I'll call for you at 6 on Christmas Eve if that suits." Nora nodded, already wondering if she was making a mistake. After Nathan left, Martha emerged from the back room, a knowing smile on her face. "So, you're going to the social with Nathan Quinn?" "You were eavesdropping," Nora accused without heat. Martha chuckled. "In my own store? Hardly. But I'm glad you're going. Nathan's one of the finest men in Willits. He's had his share of hardship, but it's only made him kinder." Nora's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of hardship?" Martha's expression grew serious. "That's his story to tell if he chooses, but I will say this: he understands pain and loss better than most." On Christmas Eve, Nora stood before the mirror in her room, more nervous than she had been in years. For the occasion, she had splurged on a new dress, dark green velvet with a high collar and long sleeves that concealed the scars on her neck and arms. Her hair was arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, and her veil, as always, covered her face. At precisely 6 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. Taking a deep breath, Nora opened it to find Nathan standing there, looking handsome in a clean black suit, his hair neatly combed. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm as they took in her appearance. Nora felt a blush rise to her cheeks, grateful that her veil hid it. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Nathan offered his arm. "Shall we?" The church was only a short walk away, but the snow-covered streets made the journey slow. Nora was acutely aware of Nathan's solid presence beside her, his arm steady under her gloved hand. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was comfortable. The church was transformed for the occasion. Evergreen boughs and red ribbons adorned the pews, and candles cast a warm glow throughout the space. A large tree stood at the front, decorated with handmade ornaments and strands of cranberries and popcorn. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small group of musicians played cheerful tunes in the corner. As Nora and Nathan entered, heads turned. Nora felt the familiar weight of curious stares, but Nathan's presence beside her made them easier to bear. He guided her through the crowd, nodding greetings to townspeople, many of whom Nora recognized from the store. Martha bustled over, her face flushed with excitement. "Nora, Nathan, I'm so glad you both came. The food is laid out. You must try Mrs. Harrington's cranberry tarts. They're divine." The evening progressed more pleasantly than Nora had dared to hope. Nathan stayed by her side, fetching her punch and introducing her to those she hadn't yet met. People were kind, if sometimes awkward, and no one asked about her veil. After supper, the musicians began playing livelier tunes, and couples took to the floor for dancing. Nora watched from the sidelines, a bittersweet ache in her chest as she remembered dancing at fiestas in Arizona before the fire. "Would you care to dance?" Nathan's voice broke into her reverie. Nora shook her head. "No, I couldn't." "Why not, my veil?" she began, but Nathan interrupted gently. "No one will mind, Nora, and if they do, that's their problem, not yours." Nora hesitated, torn between fear and longing. The music swelled and something in her responded to it. "Just one dance," she conceded. Nathan led her to the floor, placing one hand respectfully at her waist while the other clasped hers. As they began to move to the music, Nora felt stiff and self-conscious, but Nathan's steady presence gradually eased her tension. "You're a natural," he said, smiling down at her. "I used to love dancing," she admitted. "Before." She trailed off, but Nathan nodded in understanding. "Before life changed," he finished for her. "Yes." They danced in silence for a moment, then Nathan said quietly, "We all have a before and an after, Nora. The trick is finding joy in the after, even when it seems impossible." His words struck a chord deep within her. "Is that what you did?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "I'm still trying," he admitted. "Some days are better than others." The music ended, and Nathan led her back to their seats. Nora was about to ask him more about his own before and after when Reverend Simmons called for attention. "Friends," the Reverend began, "as is our tradition, we'll now share the Christmas story and sing carols before we depart." Children performed a simple nativity scene while the Reverend read from the Gospel of Luke. Afterward, the congregation sang Silent Night, the familiar melody weaving through the candlelit church. Nora found herself singing along, her voice quiet but steady. As the final notes faded, people began to gather their belongings and say their goodbyes. Nathan helped Nora with her cloak, then offered his arm once more. "May I walk you home?" he asked. "Yes, please," she replied. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars shimmering like diamonds in the dark sky. Fresh snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked slowly back toward the store. "Thank you for convincing me to come," Nora said. "It was nice to be part of something again." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Nathan replied. "Everyone was pleased to see you there. You're becoming a valued member of this community, whether you realize it or not." They reached the side entrance to Nora's rooms, and she turned to face him. Would you like to come up for coffee, as a thank you for escorting me tonight?" Surprise and pleasure flickered across Nathan's face. "I'd like that very much." Nora led the way up the narrow stairs to her rooms. She had decorated for Christmas in her own small way, with the pine branch Nathan had given her and a few red ribbons from the store. A small wrapped package sat on the table, her gift to Martha, to be given the next day. While Nora prepared coffee, Nathan looked around her modest living space. His gaze lingered on the photograph of her parents. "Your family?" he asked. Nora nodded, bringing the coffee to the table. "My parents. That was taken just after they were married." "You have your mother's eyes," Nathan observed. Nora froze, her hand halfway to her cup. "How can you tell?" Nathan looked chagrined. "I apologize. Sometimes I can see the shape of your eyes through your veil when the light hits it just right." "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Nora relaxed slightly. "It's all right. Yes, I'm told I have her eyes. She was from Madrid originally. My father was from northern Mexico. They met in Tucson. And you, were you born in Arizona Territory?" "Yes," Nora replied, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "We had a small ranch near Prescott." Nathan seemed to sense her discomfort with the topic and changed the subject. "What will you do tomorrow for Christmas?" "Martha has invited me to have dinner with her at the boarding house," Nora said. "What about you?" A shadow passed over Nathan's face. "I usually ride out to the foothills, spend the day alone." "That sounds lonely," Nora said before she could stop herself. Nathan shrugged. "It's peaceful. After the war, I find I sometimes need the quiet." Nora studied him, realizing there was much she didn't know about this kind, steady man. "Were you very young when you joined the cavalry?" 17, he admitted. "Lied about my age, thought I was being patriotic." He shook his head. "I was just a foolish boy who had no idea what war really meant." "You fought for the Union," Nathan nodded. "My family had a small farm in Illinois. My father was a staunch abolitionist. When the war came, he encouraged me to enlist." He stared into his coffee. "He died while I was away. Influenza. My mother followed a year later. By the time I came home, there was nothing left for me there." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. "It was a long time ago," Nathan replied. "But Christmas was always special in our family, so the day brings memories." They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee. When Nathan finally rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Nora," he said, his voice serious, "I've enjoyed getting to know you these past months. I'd like to continue if you're willing." Nora's heart thumped painfully in her chest. "Continue calling on you," Nathan clarified. "Properly. With your permission, of course." Nora's mind raced. Part of her longed to say yes, to explore the feelings that had been growing between them. But another part, the part that remembered the horror in people's eyes when they saw her face held back. "Nathan," she began carefully, you don't know what you're asking." "I believe I do," he countered gently. "No," she insisted. "You don't know what I look like beneath this veil." What happened to me? Nathan's blue eyes were steady as they met hers. I know enough. I know you're brave and kind. I know you stood up for Lily when others wouldn't. I know you're intelligent and thoughtful. Whatever is beneath your veil doesn't change those things. Tears welled in Nora's eyes, and she was grateful he couldn't see them. You say that now, but Nora, Nathan interrupted, his voice soft but firm, I've seen terrible things. Men torn apart by cannonballs. Friends dying slowly from infected wounds. Burns, scars, amputations. Whatever you're hiding, I promise you, it won't change how I feel. Nora's breath caught. How you feel? Nathan stepped closer, taking her gloved hands in his. I care for you, Nora, more than I expected to care for anyone again. I'd like the chance to see if these feelings might grow into something more, but only if you want that too. Nora stood perfectly still, afraid that if she moved, the moment would shatter like glass. I need time to think, she finally whispered. Nathan nodded, releasing her hands. Of course. Take all the time you need. Merry Christmas, Nora. Merry Christmas, Nathan. After he left, Nora sat for a long time at her small table, her coffee growing cold as she contemplated his words and the choice before her. Christmas Day dawned bright and clear, the sun reflecting blindingly off the fresh snow. Nora rose early, unable to sleep as thoughts of Nathan Quinn chased each other through her mind. His request to court her properly had stirred feelings she had believed dead: hope, desire, fear. After dressing, she removed her veil and stood before the mirror, forcing herself to look at the scars that had defined her existence for the past 3 years. The angry red of the burns had faded to pink and white, but the damage was no less dramatic. The right side of her face was a maze of twisted skin, pulling her eyes slightly downward at the corner and distorting her once full lips. Could Nathan really look at her, truly look at her, and still care? Or would he recoil in horror, as others had? A knock at her door startled her from her reflections. Hastily replacing her veil, she called, "Who is it?" "It's Martha, dear." "Merry Christmas." Nora opened the door to find Martha standing there with a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. "I wanted to give you this before the dinner rush at the boarding house," the older woman explained. "Please come in," Nora said, ushering Martha inside. "I have something for you as well." They exchanged gifts, and Martha insisted Nora open hers first. Inside the package was a beautiful shawl, soft blue wool embroidered with delicate flowers. "Martha, it's lovely," Nora breathed, running her fingers over the fine stitching. "I thought it would compliment your eyes," Martha said with a smile. "Now open yours." Martha's gift from Nora was a pair of leather gloves lined with rabbit fur. "For your arthritis," Nora explained. "The fur should keep your hands warm even on the coldest days." "How thoughtful," Martha exclaimed, trying on the gloves. "They fit perfectly." After Martha left, promising to see Nora at dinner later, Nora decided to attend the Christmas morning service at the church. She slipped into a back pew just as the service was beginning, her eyes scanning the congregation for Nathan, but he was nowhere to be seen. Reverend Simmons preached about hope and new beginnings, words that resonated with Nora's current state of mind. As the congregation sang "Joy to the World," Nora found herself thinking of Nathan, alone in the foothills, and wished he were there to share in the celebration. After the service, Nora returned to her room to collect Martha's gift before heading to the boarding house for Christmas dinner. As she approached the side entrance to her rooms, she was surprised to see a small package leaning against her door. The package contained a book, a new copy of Pride and Prejudice, to replace her well-worn one, and a note in a strong, masculine hand. "Nora, Merry Christmas. I noticed your copy was falling apart at the seams. I hope this one brings you as much joy as the old one clearly has." With affection, Nora clutched the book to her chest, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Nathan must have observed her reading during their chance encounters, noticed the state of her beloved book, and remembered. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the kind of man he was. Dinner at the boarding house was a lively affair, with Martha and several other Willits residents gathered around a long table laden with food. Nora sat quietly, participating in the conversation when addressed, but mostly observing the camaraderie around her. These people had welcomed her, veiled and mysterious as she was, into their community. Perhaps it was time to trust at least one of them with the truth. As the short winter day faded into dusk, Nora made her decision. Excusing herself from the boarding house, she walked through the quiet streets of Willits, heading not toward her room but toward the livery stable. The stable owner, Mr. Peterson, looked surprised to see her. "Miss Vasquez, what can I do for you this Christmas evening?" "I need to rent a horse," Nora said, her voice steady despite her nerves, "and directions to the foothills where Mr. Quinn might be." Mr. Peterson's bushy eyebrows rose, but he asked no questions. "I've got a gentle mare that would suit you. And I know where Nathan usually goes. There's an old trapper's cabin he uses sometimes. About an hour's ride from here." Nora nodded. "Thank you. I won't be gone long." As Mr. Peterson saddled the mare, he gave Nora careful directions. "Follow the creek north until you reach a stand of pines. The cabin is just beyond, in a small clearing. You can't miss it. There's a stone chimney." The ride was cold but exhilarating. Nora had always loved riding, and it had been years since she'd been on horseback. The mare was indeed gentle, picking her way carefully through the snow as they followed the creek away from town. The sun was setting by the time Nora reached the stand of pines Mr. Peterson had described. Through the trees, she could see smoke rising from a chimney and the warm glow of firelight in a small window. Her heart pounding, Nora dismounted and tied the mare to a tree. She approached the cabin slowly, gathering her courage with each step. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath and knocked. The door swung open to reveal Nathan, his expression changing from confusion to surprise when he saw her. "Nora, what are you doing here? Is everything all right? May I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's rather cold out here." "Of course," he said, stepping aside. "Forgive me, I'm just surprised to see you." The cabin was small but neat, with a fire burning in the stone hearth and a small table set with a single plate. Nathan's saddle and gear were piled neatly in one corner, and his bedroll was laid out near the fire. "I got your gift," Nora said, removing her gloves but keeping her cloak on. "Thank you. It was very thoughtful." "You're welcome," Nathan replied, still looking puzzled by her presence. "I'm glad you liked it." "Nathan," Nora began, her voice trembling slightly, "yesterday you said you wanted to court me properly, that you cared for me." "I meant it," he said quietly. "Every word." Nora nodded, her hands rising to the edge of her veil. "Then there's something you need to see first. Something you need to understand about me." Before she could lose her nerve, Nora lifted her veil, revealing her scarred face to Nathan's gaze. She heard his sharp intake of breath and closed her eyes, unable to bear the sight of disgust or pity that would surely follow. For a long moment, there was silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Then, gentle fingers touched her chin, tilting her face upward. "Look at me, Nora," Nathan said softly. Reluctantly, she opened her eyes to find him studying her face with an intensity that made her want to hide. But there was no disgust in his expression, no horror or revulsion. There was only a deep, steady warmth and something that looked remarkably like tenderness. "3 years ago," she said, her voice barely audible, "our ranch was attacked by raiders. They set fire to our home while we slept. My parents. They didn't make it out. I was trapped, surrounded by flames. A neighbor pulled me from the fire, but not before. Not before the fire marked you, Nathan finished for her. Nora nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was the beautiful one, you see, the belle of Prescott. Young men would ride for days just to dance with me at fiestas. And then, overnight, I became a monster, someone to be pitied or feared. Nathan's thumb gently wiped away a tear from her unscarred cheek. You are not a monster, Nora Vasquez. You never were. Look at me, she insisted, her voice breaking. Really look at what the fire did. I am looking, he said, his blue eyes never leaving hers. I see a brave woman who survived unimaginable tragedy. I see strength and courage and beauty. Beauty, she repeated incredulously. Don't lie to me, Nathan, not about this. I'm not lying, he said firmly. I see you, Nora. I see you beneath every mark, beneath every scar, and what I see is beautiful. Fresh tears spilled down Nora's cheeks at his words. No one, not even her aunt who had taken her in after the fire, had spoken to her with such acceptance, such understanding. How? She whispered. How can you look at me and see anything but these scars? Nathan's expression softened. Because I know what it's like to bear scars, both visible and invisible. He stepped back and began unbuttoning his shirt. Nora watched, confused, as he pulled the fabric aside to reveal his chest and left shoulder. A massive scar stretched across his torso, the skin puckered and discolored. Shiloh, he explained quietly, caught a piece of shrapnel from a cannon blast. Nearly died. Sometimes I wish I had. Why would you wish that? Nora asked, shocked. Nathan rebuttoned his shirt. Because I was the only one in my unit who survived that day. 23 men, all of them my friends, all of them dead, and I lived with nothing but this scar to remind me of them. Understanding dawned in Nora's eyes. This was his before and after the dividing line in his life, just as the fire had been hers. So you see, Nathan continued, I understand something about living with scars, about feeling marked by the past, about wondering if you deserve to be happy when others didn't get the chance. He stepped closer, his hands gently cradling her face. But I've learned something in all these years, Nora. Our scars, they're part of us, but they don't define us. They're proof that we survived, that we're still here, still fighting, still living. Nora leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she absorbed his words. I've been hiding for so long, she whispered. Behind my veil, behind my fear. You don't have to hide from me, Nathan promised. Never from me. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Nathan lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle kiss. Nora stiffened for a moment, then surrendered to the tenderness of his touch, to the acceptance she found in his embrace. When they parted, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Merry Christmas, Nora, he murmured. Merry Christmas, Nathan, she replied. A smile, her first true smile in 3 years, curving her lips. As winter gave way to spring, Nora's life transformed in ways she had never dared to hope. Her relationship with Nathan blossomed, their mutual understanding of loss and survival creating a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. With Nathan's encouragement, Nora began to venture out in public without her veil more frequently. At first, she wore it to church and large gatherings, removing it only in the company of those she trusted. But gradually, as the people of Willits came to know her for herself rather than her scars, the veil became less necessary. There were still stares, still whispers, but Nora found that with Nathan by her side, they mattered less. His unwavering acceptance gave her the courage to face the world unmasked, to reclaim the life that the fire had nearly stolen from her. One warm day in early April, Nathan took Nora riding in the hills outside Willits. They picnicked beside a clear stream, watching as new leaves unfurled on the trees around them, a testament to the resilience of life. "I've been thinking," Nathan said as they sat side by side on a blanket, "about the future." Nora glanced at him, noting the serious expression on his face. "What about it?" "I've been working for Mrs. Winters for 5 years now, making deliveries, saving what I can," he began. "There's a piece of land for sale just outside town. Good water, decent grazing. I've been thinking of buying it, starting a small ranch." "That sounds wonderful," Nora said, genuinely pleased for him. "You'd make an excellent rancher." Nathan took her hand, his blue eyes intent on hers. "I don't want to do it alone, Nora. I want to build that life with you." Nora's breath caught as she realized what he was saying. "Nathan, I love you, Nora Vasquez," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that day you stood up to that drunk in the alley, wielding a piece of wood like you were 10 feet tall. You're the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I've ever known, inside and out." Tears filled Nora's eyes as Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring, simple but elegant. "This was my mother's," he explained. "I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to. Nora, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, scars and all?" Nora looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, this strong, gentle man who had taught her to see beyond her scars, to find joy in the after of her life. "Yes," she whispered, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, Nathan Quinn, I will marry you." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a tenderness that spoke of promises kept and a future shared. They were married in the Willits church on a bright May morning, with Martha Winters beaming proudly from the front pew and the entire town in attendance. Nora wore a simple white dress with lace at the collar and sleeves, and for the first time since the fire, she wore flowers in her hair instead of a veil. As they exchanged vows, Nora looked into Nathan's eyes and saw not pity or tolerance, but love deep, abiding love that accepted her completely, scars and all. "I, Nathan Quinn, take you, Nora Vasquez, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to love and cherish you all the days of my life, to see the beauty in each day we share, and to always, always see you, the true you, beneath every mark." Nora's voice trembled with emotion as she repeated her own vows, promising to love and honor this man who had shown her that life after tragedy could still hold joy, still hold beauty, still hold love. When Reverend Simmons pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her before the entire congregation, a public declaration that Nora Vasquez Quinn was loved, completely and unconditionally. The small ranch that Nathan purchased became their home, a place of new beginnings. With Nora's help, they expanded from a few cattle to a respectable herd. Nora continued to work part-time for Martha, keeping the store's books in order, but increasingly her life centered around the ranch and the community they were building there. In the fall of their first year of marriage, Nora discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled her with both joy and terror: joy at the new life growing within her, terror at the thought of a child who might inherit her scars or, worse, be ashamed of a mother whose face frightened other children. "What if our child is afraid of me?" She confessed her fears to Nathan one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "Our child will love you," Nathan assured her, "because children are wiser than adults in many ways. They see with their hearts, not just their eyes. Our child will see you as I do, beautiful, brave, and infinitely lovable." As her body changed with the pregnancy, Nora found a new appreciation for its strength, for its ability to nurture life after having survived such trauma. The scars that stretched across her torso and arms, once symbols of loss and pain, became reminders of her resilience. In late spring, Nora gave birth to a son with Nathan's blue eyes and her dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Nathan's father, and as she held him for the first time, Nora watched anxiously for any sign of fear or rejection in his tiny face. But Thomas merely yawned, his little hand clutching her finger with surprising strength, completely unconcerned with the scars that had once defined his mother's existence. "See," Nathan said softly, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders as they both gazed at their son. "He knows exactly who you are." As Thomas grew, he indeed showed no awareness that his mother's appearance was in any way unusual. To him, the textured skin of her cheek was simply part of her, no more remarkable than the color of her eyes or the sound of her voice. He would reach up to touch her face with the same innocent curiosity with which he explored the world around him. And each time, Nora's heart would swell with gratitude for this unconditional acceptance. When Thomas was 3, a new addition joined their family, a daughter they named Alina, after Nora's mother. She had Nora's expressive eyes and, as she grew, showed the same fiery spirit that had once characterized Nora before the fire. Life on the ranch was not always easy. There were droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. But through it all, Nora and Nathan faced each challenge together, their shared understanding of hardship making them stronger as a couple. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Nathan surprised Nora by taking her back to the trapper's cabin where she had first shown him her face. The cabin looked much the same, though Nathan had arranged for a proper bed to be installed and had brought along supplies for a special dinner. "Why here?" Nora asked as they settled in for the evening, the children safely in the care of Martha back in town. Nathan built a fire in the hearth, then came to sit beside her on the edge of the bed. "Because this is where our life together truly began," he said. "Where you trusted me enough to show me your scars, and I trusted you enough to show you mine." Nora leaned against his shoulder, reflecting on the journey they had taken together. "I was so afraid that day," she admitted. "Afraid you would look at me and see only the fire's handiwork." "What I saw then is what I see now," Nathan said, turning to face her. His fingers gently traced the contours of her scarred cheek. "A woman of extraordinary courage, a woman who refused to let tragedy define her, a woman I fall more deeply in love with every day." Nora covered his hand with her own, holding it against her face. "You taught me to see myself differently," she said softly, "to see beyond the scars." "No," Nathan corrected her. "I merely reminded you of who you always were beneath them." They made love that night with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their relationship from the beginning. Their bodies both scarred, both beautiful in their imperfection, moving together in the firelight. As they lay together afterward, Nora thought about how far she had come from that frightened, veiled woman who had arrived in Willits 6 years earlier. She had found not just acceptance, but love. Not just a place to hide, but a home. Not just a man willing to overlook her scars, but one who saw the beauty within and beyond them. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how differently things might have turned out," Nora replied, "if I hadn't come to Willits. If you hadn't been so persistent, if I hadn't found the courage to show you my face that Christmas night." Nathan pulled her closer. "I believe some things are meant to be," he said. "Some souls are meant to find each other, no matter what obstacles stand in their way. You really believe that?" Nora asked, lifting her head to look into his eyes. "I do," he said with quiet certainty. "How else do you explain two scarred, broken people finding such wholeness together?" Nora smiled, seeing the truth of his words reflected in the love that had transformed both their lives. "I suppose some scars lead us exactly where we need to go," she said. "Exactly, Nathan agreed, kissing her softly. "And I, for one, wouldn't change a single mark." As years passed, the Quinn ranch prospered. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's compassion. Alina became a firebrand, quick-witted and determined, with a talent for numbers that rivaled her mother's. When Thomas was 16 and Alina 13, Nora gave birth to their third child, a boy they named Michael. The children were a source of immeasurable joy, each unique, each a testament to the life Nora and Nathan had built from the ashes of their separate tragedies. Willits grew as well, the railroad bringing new prosperity to the region. Nora eventually took over the general store when Martha retired, expanding the business with Nathan's help. The store became a cornerstone of the community, and Nora, once so afraid of being seen, became one of the town's most respected citizens. There were still difficult days, still moments when the memories of the fire would wake Nora in the night, her heart pounding with remembered terror. On those nights, Nathan would hold her close, his steady presence anchoring her to the present, to the life they had created together. And there were days when Nathan would grow quiet, his thoughts turning to the friends he had lost at Shiloh, to the survivor's guilt that never completely vanished. On those days, Nora would sit with him in silence, her hand in his, a reminder that he was not alone in carrying the weight of his past. But mostly, there was joy in watching their children grow, in building their ranch and business, in the quiet moments between them when a look or a touch could still convey the depth of their connection. On their 20th anniversary, with their children grown or nearly so, Nora and Nathan hosted a celebration at the ranch. Friends and family gathered to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in Willits. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Nathan took Nora's hand and led her away from the festivities, to a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree that had stood witness to their years together. 20 years, he marveled, his hair now streaked with silver but his blue eyes as clear and steady as ever. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it. The best 20 years of my life," Nora replied, her own hair showing strands of gray, her scarred face lined now with age as well as fire. But to Nathan, she was as beautiful as she had been on their wedding day. "You remember what I said to you that first Christmas in the cabin?" he asked. Nora smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "You said you saw me beneath every mark." "And I still do," Nathan said, taking both her hands in his. "Every day I see the brave girl who survived the fire, the woman who removed her veil and faced the world, the wife who has stood beside me through everything, the mother who has raised our children with such love and strength." Tears shimmered in Nora's eyes. "And I see you, Nathan Quinn, the man who taught me that scars are not the end of a story but part of it, the man who has loved me all of me without reservation or condition." Nathan pulled her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been 20 years earlier. "Here's to 20 more years," he whispered against her hair, "and 20 more after that if we're blessed enough. And beyond," Nora added, lifting her face for his kiss. "In whatever comes after this life, I will find you again." As they returned to their celebration, hand in hand, Nora reflected on the long journey from that terrified, veiled woman to the person she was today. The scars remained they always would, but they had ceased to define her. Instead, they had become merely one chapter in a much larger, richer story. The story of a woman who had been scarred beyond recognition, and the cowboy who had seen her true self beneath every mark. In the years that followed, Nora often told their story to her grandchildren, who would gather at her feet, their young faces turned up in rapt attention. She told them not to hide from their own pain, but to find the courage to show their scars visible and invisible to those worthy of their trust. For it is in being seen, truly seen, that we find our greatest healing, she would say, her eyes meeting Nathan's across the room, a lifetime of love and understanding passing between them in a single glance. And in that glance was everything. The fire that had nearly destroyed her, the war that had nearly broken him, and the love that had saved them both, showing them that even the deepest scars could lead to the most profound blessings.